Here's a question for you. Do you enjoy the city life, or would you favor living on a farm or in some kind of smaller, tighter knit community? That is the question that inspired a whole quilt. And today we're going to do a block from that quilt. So let's get started. So this week's block is actually a suggestion by one of our subscribers. So Memoirs of a Longarm Quilter, thank you for inspiring us to do this block. Now, the suggestion came that we should, or her suggestion, I should say, was that we do the farmer's wife block. But unbeknownst to her, the farmer's wife is not exactly a block, so to speak. It's actually an entire sampler quilt, or what we would call a sampler quilt, where it's just a mix of different blocks that get sewn into a quilt. Now, I did find this book online on Amazon. It's called The Farmer's Wife Sampler Quilt Block, or Sampler Quilt, I should say. And it's by Lori Aaron Hurd. Okay, so you can find this book. It's still sort of in print. But basically, okay, the story behind the farmer's wife quilt was back in the 1920s, there was an actual magazine called The Farmer's Wife. And this was not no rinky-dink city town or town hall newsletter. It was a very formidable magazine. According to this book, it had over 750,000 subscribers. I can't even get that many subscribers on YouTube. It was a pretty formidable magazine. And this magazine in 1922 asked a very simple question. If you had a daughter that was of age to where she could marry legally, would you marry that daughter to a farmer? And at the time, women did not have a positive view of farmers' wives. The author actually explains that there was some misconceptions about wives that lived on the farm or farmer's wife. Now, understand that in the United States around the 1920s, a lot of people were giving up farm life and moving into the bigger cities. And so there was a negative image about families or people that still worked on the farm. There were several thousands of women that actually responded to that farmer's wife question. And surprisingly, the letter said that there's an advantage that these women, these farmers' wives, have over these city wives. And a lot of it had to do with just going back to simpler times and understanding or having a good work ethic. So, if you grew up on a farm, you know that you have to wake up at the butt crack of dawn, or even before the butt crack of dawn, just to get up and start working, feeding the animals, feeding the chickens. And it's a lot of hard back-breaking work. And so having that back-breaking work is what makes you have a very, very good work ethic, good morals, just going back to nature in itself. So now, what these letters have to do with the quilt itself, there's not a clear connection to it. But in this book, Lori actually prints excerpts of certain letters. And this letter, or this question, was actually posed as a contest to these women, or to the magazine subscribers. There was a certain amount of winners. Of course, you had your first place, second place, third place, and then a whole bunch of, I guess, honorable mention people. The block that Memoirs of a Longarm Quilter suggested doing was actually this one. That's a pretty doll. There, you can grab it by the light. And so I thought it was fairly simple, but when I really took a good look at it, it's all half square triangle. And you know how I am with half square triangles. I don't hate them, but I always get them wrong. I figure, oh, okay, This will be a challenging block for me personally because of the half square triangle, but it's not an impossible block. The block is actually called flock. Let's make flock. Okay, a little housekeeping notice before we get started with this week's block. You see, I'm actually spending the time just cleaning out this quilting space, and I discovered a lot of fabric here and there. Here, take a look. See all of that fabric there? Somehow I've been working my way through these stacks and cutting them up into smaller pieces so I can use them. And there's also more fabric over there hanging, as well as I got old clothes that I'm going to cut up to make a quilt. Yep. So I'm spending most of my weekends just actually getting rid of that stuff. And well, in the process of cleaning up a lot of this, well, you know how it is. You find stuff and then you're like, when did I buy this? There was a time when I was a beginning quilter that I bought and fell in love with a ton of jelly rolls like this. Now this one I found is by Benartex, and I'm not sure what the fabric line is called, but I bought this a number of years ago and I totally forgot about it, and I figure now I'm never really going to use this, so I'm going to give it away. So that's right, we're doing a giveaway. So this is how it's going to work. First of all, join the Facebook group of Treasure Heart Creations and post a picture of a project that you're working on, whether you're working on one of the 52-week, 52 blocks, or if you're doing a project for another sew along. No matter what it is, just post a picture, and post a lot of pictures, because for every picture that you post, you'll get an entry into the drawing of this jelly roll. So if you post 5 pictures, that's 5 entries. You post 5,000, 5,000 entries. Please don't post 5,000 entries. Or actually, if you do post 5,000 entries, I'd like to know what your day job is. Now, all entries must be posted by September 24th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Then, on September 26th, the following Sunday, we'll post that week's 52 weeks, 52 blocks video, and we'll announce the winner at the same time. So, get working on those projects, pull out those UFOs, and let's get sewing. So to get this block started, I'm going to use 5-inch squares here. So I got 2 of a background and 2 of a print. Now this is all made up of half square triangles of varying sizes. So on one of these on both of these background squares actually, I'm going to be drawing a diagonal line. Now on one of them, I'm actually going to draw 2 diagonal lines, making that crisscross formation. And let's see here. Now with this, I'm just using a regular mechanical pencil here. You can use any kind of marking tool that you like to use. And on this particular square here, what we're going to do is we're going to do the 8 at a time method of half square triangles, where I'm going to draw both of these diagonal lines here, and with each diagonal line we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam on both sides of the line. So on this line here, I don't know if you can see that in the camera, we're going to sew 1/4 inch on this side and this side. Then we're also going to sew 1/4 inch away from the center line on here and here. Eventually what we'd like to end up with is a half square triangle that measures 2 inches. And so we're going to get 8 of them out of this one square. Then on the other background square, first of all, we're going to actually cut this to 4 inches. So because this is a 5-inch square, I'm gonna cut off an inch. We're gonna trim off an inch from here. And what we want eventually is we want a we're gonna end up with a half square triangles, or 2 half square triangles that are 3.5 inches. So let's see, there's a 4-inch there. I'm just making sure that, okay. This I'm gonna throw in my crumb bin here, which I have right here. So you'll see me sew pieces of crumbs together in between different blocks. Then, so now we should have a 4-inch square. We're gonna mark the diagonal line, and we're gonna use the 2 at a time half square triangle method, where I'm gonna mark that center diagonal line, and we're gonna sew a 1/4 inch away from that center line on both sides of the line. Okay. Then also we need to cut on one of the print fabrics. We also need to cut that down to 4 inches. So let me do that real quick. Where's my square? Try use the square ruler for this. It'll be a lot easier. So 4 inches and 4 inches, lining it up, and I can cut that off. Ooh, shift it a little bit. So again, I started off with 2 background 5-inch squares and 2 print 5-inch squares. I cut 2 of them down and squared it off at 4 inches. On the 4-inch square, I just drew 1 diagonal seam from corner to corner, and we're gonna sew 1/4 inch away from that diagonal line. On the original 5-inch square, I drew diagonal lines on 2 diagonal lines, basically marking an X, and on both of those diagonal lines, we're gonna sew a 1/4 inch away on both sides. The 4-inch and the 5-inch. Okay, so let's go to the sewing, or let's start sewing these together. Okay, so this is the original 5-inch square. I sewed a 1/4 inch here, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch seams there, and that way. Then this is the 4-inch square, 1/4 inch away down that's one center line. So let's square up these blocks. So to start, now this is the 4-inch square, so I'm just going to cut it once diagonally right on your mark line. Then we are going to trim these down to 3.5. So lining up my 3.5 mark there, right on the seam line, and lining it up 3.5 here, right on the seam line, and we trim. Trim this one. Then I'll turn it over, and lining up 3.5 here and 3.5 here, and that line, it's a little bit off. Actually, it's way off, so let me lift it up and move it. There we go. And we'll trim off the dog ears. Then we have a 3.5 inch square. And for now, I'm going to finger press this to the darker print fabric here. You can press the seams open. I'm just pressing them over to one side. And we do the same thing with the other one. And we're going to just press it open. Again, I'm pressing the seams over to the red or the darker fabric. And there's your half square triangle. Okay, now this is the 5-inch square. We're going to be cutting diagonally both ways, and we're also going to be cutting right down the middle horizontally as well as vertically. And this is the 8 at a time half square triangle method. So when you have blocks like this where you need to turn it, it's one of the big reasons why I like this smaller purple mat is that I can just rotate it, place my ruler, cut it, rotate it, and I don't have to move the fabrics as much. Okay, if you have a rotating mat, you can use that as well. I just have this smaller mat, which is a little bit more convenient for me on blocks like this, so I like to use the smaller mat. So okay, we'll cut it this way. Lift up your ruler, don't move the fabric, realign it, and we'll cut it right on that marked diagonal line. Okay, then lift the ruler. Now, since I know that this is a 5-inch square, the middle should be at 2.5 inches. And so I'm going to line up at 2.5 here. Yeah, I'm just going to line it up 2.5 inches there, make sure that's good. And then when you cut it, it should go right through that center there. So there's one. I don't think I got there. Okay, lift up the ruler. I'm going to rotate it again. Then lining up the 2.5 inch line here. Whoops, dropped the rotary cutter. Good thing I had the safety on. Always remember to put the safety back on your rotary cutter. Lesson learned. Okay, but I got the 2.5 inch line mark here. I'm gonna go right through that center there. So let's cut. And now we have 8. Whoop, missed a thread. Okay, so we got 8 half square triangles here now. Now with each of these half square triangles, we're gonna even square them down to 2 inches. So I'll leave that block there. So we're gonna do lining up 2 inches here and 2 inches there, right? Making sure the 2-inch mark is right on the seam line, and I'll trim that out, and we'll trim that one up. Rotate it around, and then lining up 2 inches here and 2 inches there, and cut off the dog ears. So I'm pausing here because I figured you don't need to watch me square up the rest of the 7 half square triangles to 2 inches. You guys get the idea, right? Well, actually, truth be told, my camera ran out of battery juice, and so I was doing things and didn't realize that the camera was off. But you get the idea. So let's move forward. There's a lot of half square triangles on this one, so yeah, I need some reinforcements. Yeah, okay. Now we're ready. This is always the spot where I'm gonna sew something wrong, so yeah, I need that. Let's get sewing. Notice something about this block, that all the prints are facing or pointing to one direction here. Even on these smaller 2-inch triangles, they're all pointing in this direction, and all the backgrounds are pointing into this direction. That's actually very key on this block. Okay, so we got the block laid out. Let's go back to the sewing machine and put this sewing or sew this block back together. I knew I was gonna do that. I totally sewed these half square triangles in the wrong direction. Ah, well. Where's Jack? I need to rip this apart. Okay, this is one of those situations where I'm definitely gonna say, do as I say, not as I do, because here's what ended up happening. I knew I was gonna do this. I actually sewed the blocks wrong, like that, when they're supposed to go like that. So I tried ripping the seam apart, but in the process of ripping that seam apart, I actually ripped the block apart too there. So you can see there's a gaping hole right there. Yeah, not a good thing. So again, do as I say, not as I do. So I'm gonna scrap this one, or I don't know, maybe I'll put it in my crumb bin here. Fortunately, now I'm not gonna sew the whole thing again, but this might be a good opportunity to also demonstrate that you can make this with 2.5-inch squares, where you can make that block with a 2.5-inch square. So here's what we're gonna do. I am gonna sew, I have a 2.5-inch square of the print and a 2.5 square of the background, right sides together. I'm gonna mark the line on this background fabric here. And I'm gonna mark it right diagonally, right on the corner. Oh, I have lead. So there's my line, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch away from that center line, on both sides of the line I should say. So 1/4 inch away here, quarter inch down the other way. Then we can cut it in half. Okay, again, so this is another method of doing this block with all these half square triangles. If you don't have a 5-inch square, you can just use 2.5-inch squares. Same process, you're just going to be doing this. squaring it up at 2 inches. The other one. Blame it on the elixir. It's not working today. Then drop the cutter. Drop the cutter, close it. Got my 2 blocks. I'm just going to finger press it open for the time being. And I think this was a really scant 1/4 inch because this is, yeah, that's small. But, oh yeah, because I can definitely see that I didn't cut it right on the lines there, because you can kind of see the marking and a little sliver, but that's okay. It'll still end up being 2 inches. That's in the seam allowance, so that's all right. I knew this was going to happen, but we're going to sew. Is that right? Yep, that's right. So we're going to sew these together. Now the block is supposed to look like this with all the print fabrics pointing in that same direction there. So we're going to sew this together. And then hopefully we get the orientation correct this time. I really need you today. Please work. Please, please work. I need you. Okay. Now I feel, yeah, I feel it working. Okay, let's sew this block. Moment of truth. Oh, look at that. That is just beautiful. Oh, I'm so proud of myself after all of that. Okay, let's get this block pressed. And once again, you have come through for me. Thank you. All gone. And I needed every single last drop of that one today. And here is the finished flock block. Try saying that 5 times fast. Now the block will finish at 6.5 inches or somewhere roughly in the ballpark. If you're like me, my 1/4 inch seam is never really 100% accurate, so yeah, but close enough is good enough for me. Well, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell for notifications on when I upload the next video. Join us on the Facebook discussion group at Treasure Heart Creations, and if you're sewing along, post a picture on it on Instagram or on Facebook using the hashtag THC5252. Well, I'll see you next time, and until then, go out and create something.